Hello, everyone. Nicholas Muy here, CISO Scrut Automation. We're here with another episode of Risk Grustlers, and we're doing this on location from Black Hat in 2025. I'm here with Larry Whiteside Jr., the co-founder and president of Confide Group. Larry, it would be great, I think for the folks that are listening to learn a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. It's been a journey. I did not intend to come into cyber. Cyber, I sort of fell into. My grandfather I'll give a whole story. My grandfather was a Tuskegee Airman. And so when I was graduating college, he said, hey, that technology stuff is going to go away. So go apply and become a military pilot. And I was like, I don't really want to do that. I have no interest in being a pilot. I am 6'6", Grandpa. That's not a thing. And he was like, and to get him off my back, I went. Lo and behold, the military had technical disciplines. And I said, this might not be a bad idea. So I ended up getting my commission in the Air Force, going officer training school, and that began this wonderfully long journey.
Amazing. So what were kind of, you were mentioning how you kind of fell into it. And I think I joke a lot of us we didn't go seeking out cyber, and cyber kind of found us.
Right.
Sometimes it's more like cyber punched us in the face, cyber punched us in the stomach, cyber followed us down the street. Kind of what were some of the things that you think were maybe kind of pivotal to, kind of getting you into cyber after Air Force?
Yeah. So what happened was, first off, I'm old, right? I'm a lot older than I look, right? I'm 53 years old.
You look great.
Right. And so the reality is when I went into the military, they were in this technology evolution, and firewalls became a thing in 1994, right? And so when firewalls became a thing, the Air Force had created this concept called defense in depth, right? We all know it. We've all heard it. That was my first time hearing it. And so they wanted us to begin building architectures to support that premise. So I started learning about firewalls. Prior to that, I was networking and switching, and I was running cables and walls with my teams and doing all that. But I was responsible for all technology for our base. So when I learned about this thing called a firewall, I dug in and I began to learn about security and content filtering and all those sorts of things, which perplexed me. And the funny part was, growing up in an underserved community, the mindset of security resonated with how I grew up and the mindset I had to have growing up, right? Being aware of your surroundings, paying attention, looking at, quote unquote threats that you were going to face. And so I love the mindset associated with it. And then the geek in me started falling in love with the tech part of cyber, right? What was information security, and then information warfare, information assurance.
Yes, IA. I think sometimes I forget too. Growing up, my parents are Cambodian Chinese.
Right.
So they were refugees coming here in the 80s after the war there. The idea and concept of like looking out for threats everywhere you are, being aware of your surroundings, and having to have a plan.
Right.
Didn't seem very unusual or complex. It was just kind of, this is just what I do every day, If I'm in a rough neighborhood and I'm going outside, I need to be aware. I need to look around, and I think it's just kind of knowing where I stand. I remember my dad telling me, if you get into a situation that looks like it's going to be a fight, you could fight him, but if he's twice your size, you could also just find a way to get out of there.
Right.
You need to know, and you need to be prepared for like, what makes sense right there.
That's right.
He's like, I'm not saying get beat up, but I'm also not saying pick a fight you can't win.
Right.
There's no glory in that. Because I think, I guess for the community I'm from, surviving is just,
right.
That was kind of the mindset. And I think sometimes for a lot of us in cyber, it's like on our worst days, it could feel a little bit like we're just surviving.
It could, right? Because this industry can be overwhelming, right? Yeah. But you have to pick your poison. Yeah. You can't solve every problem. You can't win every battle. You have to figure out which ones you want to tackle and are important. And honestly, right, the role of CISO and the heads of cyber, because you don't have unlimited budget, because you have all of the responsibility and none of the authority, right? You really have to pick and choose what you want to really spend your time on.
Totally. No, and I think that really resonates. A lot of our listeners are coming from kind of mid-size and smaller companies. I think it's very real that like We have to pick and choose our battles. And I think they get bombarded a lot with a lot of literature and from the pundits that like, hey, you have to go do everything. You're failing already. Why aren't you doing these 100 things? It's so easy. There's a checklist. What are you waiting for? Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So I say this a lot, and I'm being really serious when I say it. The role of the CISO, if you think about all of the C-level executives in the entire tech ecosystem, the role of the CISO is the most embattled and the most at risk. And I say that because of this. So there's no real good training for the role because in every organization it's going to be completely different based on what they ask of you, right?
100%.
But then you've got the board coming down on you. You've got the executive leadership team coming down on you. You've got your executive peers in the business coming at you. You've then got the threat actors coming at you from all different angles. But then you have these industry pundits who are saying you can do this and you should do this. And what do you pick? And then add to that, you've got the 6,000 plus cyber vendors that are filling your inbox with, hey, we can solve this problem. Hey, we can solve this problem. We'll solve every problem, right? Just implement AI. And it gets very confusing and very, very overwhelming quickly.
It is overwhelming. I even think I saw a black hat kind of organizer post on LinkedIn last night, very relevant. I think I saw him put 7,000 vendors.
It may be.
I think it's like every 30 seconds a new cyber startup is born.
I would love for someone to do that math and do the calculation. Like there should be, how there's the ticker for the New York Stock Exchange that's just running and running and running. I think there should be one for cyber companies.
The birth rate is very healthy in cyber. Something's happening there. We should look at that. No, and I think the bombarding is kind of, it gets scary and intimidating. And I think I personally, just my opinion, I don't like it when some folks in the community say, these people don't care about cyber. That's why they're not doing it. They're not doing the right things. I think a lot of people I talk to, they're trying to do the right things, even if they don't have a full-time CISO, even if it's the DevOps, director of engineering, VP of engineering, because a lot of times that person's like, hey, his boss is saying, can you just look after our security stuff that we should be doing, even if we're a 100-person company?
Right.
He's trying to do the right thing. He or she's trying to do the right thing, but they don't always have all the time in the world to do it. And they're not even cyber people,
Right.
mind you. CISOs are getting bombarded by all the vendor pitches. Now you have, I think, other folks who are actually on the hook for implementing things,
Right.
DevOps team is rolling out these fixes to the infrastructure. You have the developers who are supposed to be fixing these critical SaaS bugs. And yet everyone's saying they actually still have even more problems they haven't solved yet. They're like, hey, did you know you have 7,000 problems? Because there are 7,000 solutions. And here we are.
Here's one of the things that I try and explain to people. So when software is built, it's impossible for you to build software to mitigate against every possible scenario in the world. It's not possible. So software developers, in theory, are doing the best at which they know. So because they have to operate at the speed of business. The business isn't going to say, take as long as you need to build this application. It's okay, it's fine, because that's revenue, right? So they have to do it at a pace that makes sense for the business. But the threat actors, they just need one opportunity.
Yes.
They can try it 1 million times, right, in a 6-month period or more, but they just need that one opportunity. And it could be a flaw that, yes, it was there, but it got overlooked because you were trying to get this out. And there's this whole dichotomy, I think, that's fighting against each other. And security is, unfortunately, the one that's catching and holding the bag, right? Because the business says, hey, we need to make money. Yes, the business needs to make money so that they can pay the employees and they can take care of their customers. Great, we get it. And at the same time, there are risks that are involved with developing applications, implementing technology, and all that. Great, we understand that. So we can't mitigate every risk, but we have to understand that we have to at least acknowledge that they exist. There's so many times when people just don't even want to acknowledge it. They play what I call ostrich, right? They stick their head in the sand. And they just because if they see it, then they know that they're going to be on the hook to fix or do something about it, because regulators are coming, right? The lawyers they're standing waiting with their pens and their briefcases for, some sort of lawsuit. Class action suits are at an all-time high based on breaches. And it's a weird push-pull situation that I don't know if we'll ever get ahead of.
No, it's very real. I mean, I can feel it as you're talking about it.
Right.
I can feel. I've never met that business who's like, please take all the time in the world. Please slow down the roadmap for
Right.
me.
Right.
I don't think that exists for anyone at any size company.
Nope.
And I do think it is becoming a very real issue. And it used to be, I felt like, hey, big companies were like, this is our problem. We're big companies, we're banks, financial services, big corporate. So we have big enterprise teams. We have all the resources. We're, doing all the right things. And now, even for smaller, mid-sized companies, a couple hundred employees, the expectation from your customers, from your users, and from regulators is like, you need to be doing stuff. This is not oh, you can't do anything. You need to be doing, what makes sense and what's right. And I think trying to find that balance has been an
Well,
interesting journey.
there's been a number of things that have changed the entire dynamic of how we think about security. So, one, we used to look at it as a big corporate problem, right? Nobody thought about SMBs. SMBs, they're not, and it's because, though, threat actors didn't look at SMBs, right? In the 90s and 2000s, threat actors were largely going after large corporations, right? And back then you had script kiddies and you had some little basic stuff, but
Wholesome stuff.
right, wholesome stuff,
Yeah.
right? You didn't have the groups that you have
Yes.
today, right? But what happened was they realized that data and money matter. And they realized, hey, why take a year to try and pop a big company when I can take a month or a
Yeah.
week and get a little guy, right? And then just continue to do that and reiterate that over and over and over, right? Here in the States, 4 out of, I think, every 5 people work for SMB. So when you think about the impact to society, the attacks on SMB have a far greater impact because if they begin to go out of business in droves based on cyber incidents, it impacts your neighbor. It impacts the mom and pop shop down the street. It impacts, right,
Yeah.
all of these smaller
Yeah,
little
yeah.
entities that make up America, right? So it's an interesting problem to have.
No, totally. I think it's easy to forget because we're always hearing about the big companies, the big breaches, get all the attention and airtime. And then it's like the small companies, the problem is not hearing about it. It's almost scarier because it's just going to keep happening. And I think there are folks trying to do something about it, and that's great. I used to see as a buyer on the enterprise side, all the vendors trying to sell us very big solutions. And then, kind of my peers and counterparts at smaller companies be like, those guys won't even pick up the phone when I call the vendor for something that I need. And I think, they'll have to get a little smarter. We'll see what the 7,000 choose to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and here's the challenge, right? So there are a lot more companies focusing on the SMB, and it's great. The challenge is SMB still doesn't necessarily understand as much
Exactly.
that they need the help, right? So they're not making the investments. They're not understanding that security now is table stakes because with third-party relationships, your partners, your vendors, they're going to be holding you accountable to do things
Yeah.
that align to certain controls and things of that nature that are going to force you to do security. And so you may lose out on business because you didn't use
Yeah.
forethought and say, you know what, let me get someone in here to help me be more secure. I don't have to tighten everything down to the nth degree, but if I have something that can help mitigate risk for my third parties, it actually may become a business enabler for me. And we're starting to hear that word a lot more of security being a business enabler, but the small to medium-sized businesses have not really jumped in holistically on that yet.
No, truly. And I think there's a long way to go. I was curious too, and I think our listeners would be really interested to hear, maybe you could share a bit more about I see your CISO Society pin. I'm,
Yep.
proud member myself and hear about kind of as part of and maybe related to your journey too, like the CISO Society, Confide Group and kind
Yeah.
of what that's all about.
It's interesting. So I've been an 8-time CISO in a bunch of different verticals, and I've had success and failure, right? I've been fired and going on my journey, right? One of the things that I've constantly said is community matters, right? I've learned more from my community, from my peers, and conversing and chatting and learning and text groups and meeting up with them and asking questions than any training I've ever taken. So with that, about 4 years ago, my business partner, Jason, said, "Hey, Larry, I think I want to start this thing called the CISO Society." I was like, "Oh, Like, sounds interesting.
Sounds cool.
And when he started, it was started with 5, and they were just, doing Zoom calls, and it went up to 30, and then they began to grow organically. And he was like, let's take this to Slack. And then just organically, because of the conversations and the open sharing where people can go in and almost, I don't want to say commiserate, but hear
Yeah.
and share the pain and the frustration, but learn through other people's frustration. Hey, oh man, it's sorry that that happened to you. Here's what I did when that happened with me. Right. So coming together in community, I'm a faith-based guy, right? Like
Yeah.
that leads me in
Yeah.
everything. And my faith is through community. So when Jason came up with this idea and I watched this grow, he came to me and he's like, hey, could you be the CISO in residence, sort of help, foster conversation? And I
Yeah.
did that for a couple of years, and it just began to grow organically. Like, we haven't in the society gone out and pitched and, recruited. It's been the people who have
Exactly.
come to join who've then gotten value out of it and then shared with others. Hey, and we've grown in that 4 years up to 1,800
Yeah.
cyber executives across
That's
the
how I
board.
found out about it. One of my friends who'd been a longtime member, he said, hey, I think you'd really enjoy this community. It's a great place. I have a lot of, I get a lot of help. I think the other word I think it's fair to add is, healing too.
Right.
The commiseration is sort of like, I think for too many years, it felt like I'm the only one dealing with this problem. I
Right.
got the board on my back. I have the CEO on my back. The CTO says I'm the reason product's not shipping fast enough. And now here's a community of people who can both give you, I think, not just one perspective, but like, yeah, that's true, but maybe also have you thought about this? There's a little truth to everything.
Right.
And it's I don't think it's just saying like, oh yeah, we're all right, everyone else is wrong, but more so, hey, here's what worked for me, and here's how I kind of handled that. And I think that kind of sharing organically from folks, and then you feel heard,
Right.
because you don't always get that at work.
And it's sometimes it's funny, right? When you see the messages and a lot of people start privately
Yeah. Yeah,
DMing
yeah,
each other. And I'm
yeah, yeah.
I'm mentoring like 14 CISOs
That's
now, right?
amazing.
And the reality is it's almost like therapy. It's almost like I can take a deep breath
Yeah,
because others are dealing with it. It's not just me. I'm not doing something wrong,
yeah,
right? I can learn some other things, but I'm not totally off base in the way I feel
yeah.
because others are experiencing the same thing. And so people resonated with that. And it's been wonderful to see the community grow. But what we realized was there needed to be more, because one of the largest topics that happens in there is about security spend and the vendor ecosystem. And we get both good and bad, right? Hey, use this vendor. Has anybody seen? I had such a great relationship with them. It's been working really, really well, right? Does anybody have got this problem? Has anybody found somebody? Hey, yes, don't use this vendor. Like, we bought it and it went horribly wrong and they overpromised and underdelivered, right? So when we started to see the conversation start to have so much center around technology acquisition, divesting from technology, and things of that nature, we started to realize, and we had CISOs coming to us asking us, hey, do you know any companies that can help solve these problems? And when we started to ask CISOs, how do you go about it? And they're like, we just ask each other. We don't have time to go out to the market. There's too many companies that we can't figure out. It's too much noise. So Jason and I sat down last summer and we were like, maybe we've got a way that we can help, because we've got great insight into the market, right? We've got great insight through VCs and just through our knowledge of what's been going on. Because Jason has run events for years. I've been a CISO and been buying for years. And through all of the networks that we've created, we've got this great visibility into this growth. And we saw an opportunity. So we began asking some of our early members and some of our members who joined in the last few years, hey, is this something that would be valuable to you if we created a mechanism where we could sort of shrink the market for you, right? So instead of you having to spend time and even asking other people, right, come in and just say, hey, I need this. And we go and shrink the market down to one or two vendors that align to what it is you're trying to do. And it began to get some traction. And so that's how Confide ended up being born.
Oh, super cool. I think resources and community have been super helpful. I think it's probably community is probably one of the main things keeping half the industry still in this industry. Otherwise, they'd all leave. I don't. Why would you say I like punishment? That's why I'm here
Oh man,
every day.
It's very, very rough. Listen, I say this a little tongue in cheek, but by the grace of God, I pray to never have to be back in the CISO role again, right? And ultimately, I'll say this: if it were up to me, and if I had my magic ball, I would change the way the CISO role is structured. I do believe that me and a lot of people that were in the roles back in the early 2000s caused the role to be where it is today. Because here's what happened. In those days, we largely reported to CIOs,
Mhm,
and we were deeply technical people,
mhm.
right? And the role had been created. Steve, and I can't remember his name, he was at Citibank. He was one of the first actual titled CISOs.
Yeah,
But in the general sense, it was we need a technical person who understands security to come in and be this chief information security officer, right? But we were a third of the cost of a CIO. And so, but we had all the risk and we were trying to grow our domain, so to speak.
yeah,
So we kept asking for more. Ask, I want more. No, firewalls are mine. No, this is mine. No, this is mine. Oh, that's
yeah.
infrastructure. No, it's mine. It's security. And so we, over the last 20, 30 years, we've been growing our domain. Well, now we're dealing with the product of us growing our domain. Right. Where for me, if I were to ever go back into a role like that, for me, I think the best role of the CISO is a combination risk/auditor where they sit, report to the CEO, have a dotted line to the board. They, through governance with the board, set the controls of how the organization is going to run, what the risk appetite is, and then they just monitor and govern that on an active basis every day. And then the CIO owns all the operational things. Hey, you've slipped in this control. Why? What's it going to take to mitigate it? The board can determine if leaving that control unmitigated is fine or not, or if you need to mitigate. Like, take the CISO out of it, because right now, if you think about it, the CISO has all of the
So
responsibility
many things.
and none of the authority. We can't act on any of the things that we think are most important. And so the CISO role has become one. If you don't have an ability to influence, it is impossible for you to succeed. Impossible.
Yes.
And ultimately, influence shouldn't be the number one skill that a CISO has, but it's becoming the thing that you have to have in order to get your job done.
Yeah, I know. I think if you can't influence in a big company now, right now, as is status quo, you can't do that job because you're just going to be out of a job.
Right.
I've seen the pain of a CISO trying to get stuff done with the VP of networking, with the VP of data infrastructure, and then being kind of glad-handed and told like, "Oh yeah, we'll do it." And it's like, "Oh, but we got busy. Things are super important.
Right.
CTO asked me to do this, so that's why we'll get to it." And it's kind of like it's clear what's happening. They don't think they need to take him seriously. They say that's nice, go back and sit over there.
Right.
And over time too, then also the other thing that you mentioned, I've seen this where it's like we went from owning just a small thing and now it's like, no, we own firewalls. And I've seen identity bounce back and forth. It was like, should we own IAM, provisioning, deprovisioning? VP of IT seems to love it. Maybe we should keep it with him, and then that's going back and forth. BCDR, I've seen go in and out of the
Yes.
org.
Yep.
Physical securities, and that one's always fun for big companies where it's like CISO is not always wanting to I don't know if I want CCTV cameras in my responsibility and guards.
Yep.
It's a different job.
I've watched it. I've had conversations with CISOs who said I could not kick identity out fast enough.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, wait, why? Like, knowing who has access to your stuff is probably one of the most important pillars of security.
Yeah.
But they said their response, and every CISO who responded told me, but it's too complex. It's a very complex operational thing. So I don't want to own that, because then I've got to take on some portion of help desk for password resets. And they just,
And next thing you know, CISO is a CIO.
Ding, 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 ding,
So
ding, ding, ding.
I have seen this now where multiple CISOs are like, yeah, so I own DevOps, I own platform, I own network, and now I own IT.
Right. Yep.
Careful what you wish for, right?
Right. But guess what? They don't have the CIO salary.
No.
They have not gotten it.
Yeah.
And I've even seen a friend of mine, he was chief infrastructure security officer.
I I just
Right. So he went from CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, when he took over all infrastructure to Chief Infrastructure Security Officer. So he owns basically all things IT, DRBCP, and everything. It's the same salary. Like,
it's almost like a game of how many different things can we call this person without paying them more?
exactly. Exactly. And the reality is, and the CIO is now transitioning, right? So you
Yeah.
got CIO that's going into business,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
sometimes the chief data officer,
Chief digital
chief digital
officer.
officer, right? Like, I don't know. And I'm watching it, and I just don't know how we continue. Because also, if you think about it, what training, like what real training is there? And I don't want to talk about
I
certification,
don't
right?
know.
There are certification
Yeah, yeah,
bodies that have their own slants of what,
sure.
but what real training is there to be an executive leader
Yeah,
in cyber?
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Because for CIOs, they go and get business management
Yes.
degrees. They go and
Yes.
do things that align to business,
Yes.
right? So that they can understand business processes and the
Yeah.
technology to support that and enable that.
Yeah.
Security doesn't have something aligned to that at the collegiate level or any educational level that I'm aware of. And
So
if it's been created, please send me a note.
I didn't pay you to say this, but starting in October at the University of Washington, I'll be leading a number of lectures as part of a year-long executive program only for CISOs
Okay.
on through the business school
Oh, I love that.
on executive business education for CISOs
So, and I
because
think
we
a
need
couple
that.
of college,
Yeah.
so I think Carnegie Mellon
Yeah,
started
yeah.
something like that. And so there are a few, but it's what, within the last
Oh,
5
no, I
years?
know. It's very few and far in between, but I think I'd met a few folks in the community up in the Northwest back in Seattle, and they were like, "Hey, we want to do this." And I was like, "I will volunteer my time because I think it just kills me every time I meet someone who is or was and gave up being a CISO just because of I think things that it wasn't the technology that was insurmountable, right?
Right.
It was one day you're managing the SOC, one day you're managing SOC and IR, next day you're managing architecture and security engineering. And then you wake up Monday and it's like, hey, you are a bona fide GM of a Fortune 500 company.
Right.
You need to do annual planning. You need to do budgeting. You need to do like endless performance reviews and you have to manage, you have 50 managers, 500 people. You literally just went from like being a technical person and a technical leader in a
Right.
technical org. Now you're a bona fide GM, same as the head of marketing.
Yep.
And the expectation from the board and the CEO at that level, I mean, I felt this heat. So, I can feel my heart rate going up is like, they're like, you are a business leader. You're an officer of this company. This company is making money. The company is accountable to the board and shareholders. You don't get to play Mr. Cyber vulnerability management guy anymore.
Right.
We need you to step up. And it's like, it's not that people don't want to, but then they didn't get all the training and, the help and the preparation. Because I've seen the preparation for executives in other orgs.
Right.
And there's a lot of preparation that goes on, starting from like senior manager, from
Yep.
manager, because they're doing succession planning.
Yep.
You've seen succession planning for CISO orgs. It's like, well, let's take these dice, just kind of just roll them out there. Let's see. Let's just kind of let the dice fall because I mean, we're just taking too many chances.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, right? I sort of take a deep breath just because I feel for so many cyber executives, right? And I get asked all the time, right? I'm like, people come up to me, I want to be a CISO. And my first question is why? And most people can't answer that. And I think it's because they want to be a CISO because it's like the cool kids club, right?
Yes.
The CISOs get access to things and they get to go places, they get to do things and get access to rooms that other people think they want access to, right? But they don't know what comes with it, right?
Yeah.
And when I ask them why, right, and they come back to me later because they have to go think about it, they hadn't really thought about it. They come back with their why. I'm like, well, but if you want to be technical, you're like
Yeah,
the
this is not the job.
CISO is not technical, right? That like you get further and further away. The further up the food chain you go, the further you get away from the keyboard, the further you get away
Mhm.
from tech, right? I said, so if you want to be technical, just be a director of something.
Yeah.
Dive neck deep into that and just be in that role, because the pay between CISO and directors isn't as large a gap as you think it is. Number one. Number two, when the shit hits the fan, the CISO role is far more volatile than that director or senior director or VP's role is.
100%.
Right? So, yeah, you want the CISO role. Well, guess what? When stuff goes down and you're looking for a job in 18 to 24 months, right? But that VP and director role is still there. You're like, man, this is tough. And understand, CISOs don't have standard packages. It was crazy. So I was in my third or fourth CISO role before I knew about all the bonus structures that everybody else was getting. Right? I was like, wait, you get a corporate bonus and an executive bonus? What is how did I not know about that?
Yeah.
Like, why was I not informed?
Yeah.
Right?
They just forgot.
I
Sorry.
just forgot.
Yeah.
Right.
You didn't ask.
Wait, you've got an employment contract that if you get terminated before the employment contract is up, they got to buy you out. Wait, what?
Yeah.
How did I not know about
You have a
this?
severance?
You have
built
a severance
in?
Right.
Yeah.
Like you're not negotiating at the end. Like, oh, there were so many things that I learned later that I was like, this is crazy. But a lot of people look at this. The CISO role in tech is almost like a rock star, right?
Yeah.
It is almost like, oh, it's a CISO. Oh, that's a CISO over there. Look at that CISO. Oh my God. Oh, wow. Hey, don't say anything, but wow, they're super cool. No, it's not that. It is a grinding, grueling role that many people go home and just, this is why we've talked about alcoholism in the cyber community as a whole. Like, there have been articles coming out where CISOs have shared they are medicating via alcohol because of the pressures of the role. And so it needs to be talked about more. It needs to be understood more by the entire industry that this role of CISO is not what most people think it is. And when you get there, it is going to take a toll on you unless you find a way to figure out what portion of it you love. For me, it was leadership. I love helping people. My goal every single day is everyone I interact with is to help them move closer towards whatever their goal is. Right. And so when I would go in as the first CISO, as a new CISO, I met with everybody on the team, whether the team was 500 or 600. I met with everybody on the team and I asked them in their Zen world, what would you be doing? And don't say security because you want me to think, no. What would you be doing? Right? Because I want to help you reach that. Because for me, I love this industry and I love the things that I get to do. And so because of that, I don't feel it may be grinding and grueling, but I don't feel like I'm working. I'm enjoying myself in the things that I do.
No, I appreciate it. And, really appreciate you taking the time. And I think the thing that just stood out to me is one thing I ask everyone who gets to a final interview for my team is, I asked them, last question is like, if you didn't have to work, what do you really want to do? And I've learned the most amazing things about the staff that end up working for me, that he just likes making music. He likes singing, they like playing the guitar. And I think it's helpful to remember, like, at the end of the day, these are people too, not just people remediating vulnerabilities and yelling at DevOps engineers, but trying to, they have things that they want to get to, and we can just ask them. I think the things that we didn't get asked, I guess at the end of the day, that's all it is, right?
We did not.
And so now we can do it. So, well, I appreciate you taking the time, Larry.
Thank you
for
having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for being on here.
Of course. My pleasure.